Back to the Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Do we have any declarations of interest or transparency statements from board members on today's agenda? If so, can you indicate by raising your hand? No, I see none, so that's good. We will move on. So item 1.2 is the minute of the board meeting of 26 June 2024. Are we content to accept the minutes as recorded there and reported? Or if there's any questions or comments on them, please can you raise your hand and I'll bring you in. I see no hands, so therefore I'll take it as acceptance of the minutes as they're set out in the report. Item 1.3 is the Constitution and Standing Orders. It's pages 15 to 40 of your agenda pack. And with that, I will ask Rab to come in and talk to it, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Item 1.3 relates to Nestrans Constitution and Standing Orders. Members will recall we had a report to the meeting of the board on the 10th of April, where we suggested a number of mostly updates and tweaks around the Constitution and Standing Orders. There were some comments made at that meeting, and we've taken these on board. And we had proposed a workshop so we could have an informal chat around these. Although a date was set, unfortunately, we couldn't quite get a date that suited enough members of the board, and we decided to cancel that. So apologies, we haven't been able to have that this discussion informally, but I did feel that the report would have to come back to this meeting for formal decision in any case. So the contact has also been made, I should say, with Transport Scotland officials who basically have batted it back to the board. As long as we're compliant with Schedule 2 of their order, then they will be comfortable with that. I have appended both in the additional pack a track changed version of highlighting where the suggested changes are, and also in the substantive pack of papers, a clean version of the proposed Constitution and Standing Orders. So the board is recommended to approve these changes and to adopt the revised Constitution and Standing Orders. I think there has been some discussion that if the board are minded to make further changes, then we may need to actually bring it back to a future meeting, get our legal advisors to have a look at it and make sure that Transport Scotland are content before final approval. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, Chair. Thank you.
Do members have any questions or comments? Sandra, please.
Thank you very much. No, Chair, I'm happy with the changes. To be fair, as Rab said, there are very few substantive changes. In fact, hardly any. There is how motions to be put and so on. I will just point out under 2.10 though, it goes 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you might want to reorder that. But other than that, Chair, I'm happy to agree them today.
Okay, I'm just looking to see if anyone else has got. Okay, Councillor Davidson. Isabel, please.
Yeah, it was really a query about other members. So in 2.6 membership, that we could appoint advisors, which is fine. But it also says we could appoint 3 or 4 other members. So which is it? Is it 3 or 4? And who decides?
Thank you. Yes, the legislation allows us to set 3 or 4. So we're complying with that legislation to have either of these numbers. We currently have 4 external councillor members, and we'll discuss them at a later item on the agenda, their continuation or ongoing participation in the board. But we have traditionally had 4, because I guess the more the merrier, but it also gives a lovely balance where we've got 4 city council members, 4.
Oh, I've lost you.
Members. It does mean, though, if at any stage we fall below that number to 3, then we can continue to operate if the board so wishes for that period of time. But traditionally we've felt that 4 is the appropriate number.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, I see no more comments or hands raised. So I take it we're content to accept what is there, subject to just the typographical, making sure the numbering is aligned, etc. Yeah. Okay. Item 3.1 takes us on to item 3.1, which is it's in the budget matters we're here, and it's annual accounts 23-24 and the report on the 23-24 audit by the external auditor. Tina, can you take us through that, please, Tina? Right.
Thank you, Chair. This report submits the audited annual accounts for 23-24, the external auditor's report and proposed responses to the audit action plan. The external auditors from Grant Thornton are in attendance today to go over their auditor's report included at Appendix 2 and to give their current proposed opinion on the annual accounts. It was intended as one of the recommendations to ask the board to approve the audited annual accounts for signature today. However, since writing this report, there has been new national guidance issued in relation to accounting for pensions, which requires revised calculations to be obtained from our pension actuaries. The issue does not affect cash or balances and is just a potential accounting adjustment, but does need to be resolved before the accounts can be signed. The actuaries have advised that they should be able to provide the revised calculations early next week, but this is obviously not in time for today's board meeting. Therefore, with Chair's permission, we would ask the board to consider and approve a revision to Recommendation 1 to agree delegated powers for the audited annual accounts to be signed once the accounting issue is resolved without having to come back to board in November. This is because the deadline for submission of the annual accounts is the 30th of September, which will already be delayed due to the new national guidance. There are no changes proposed for the other 3 recommendations, as these are not affected by the new guidance. Thank you, Chair.
I wonder if we could also hear from Andrew Wallace of Grant Thornton, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I'd just take the first part of the meeting. So Angela Peary from Grant Thornton, Director, and joined today by Andrew Wallace, your Audit Manager. So I'll just take you through a summary of our report, and Andrew will then take you through a bit more of the detail. So as already noted, the report in front of you is our annual audit report for 23-24. That starts on page 97 of your packs. As already noted, as our report was drawn up early in September, and since the papers were issued, the national technical issue has arisen, and as noted, it stops us from signing the accounts as today, but subject to the satisfactory completion of that area of work, I anticipate issuing an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. So the set of financial statements you have on the agenda today is the final checked version, other than for the issue that may or may not need to be amended when the results come back from the actuary work. Page 99 of your pack shows our exec summary, and out width of that issue there were no amendments identified to primary statements and very minor disclosure issues noted only. The accounts were provided on time, they were of good quality with detailed supporting working papers, and officers responded very quickly to audit requests for samples and queries. This allowed the audit to be conducted over a 3-week period. In terms of the wider scope, we have a responsibility to report to you narratively on wider scope. It doesn't form part of your audit opinion, but due to the size of the body, you have a wider scope exemption. That means we're just required to look at financial sustainability as the only key area of focus. I would like to thank officers for their response to the audit to date and the speedy response for the pensions issue that's currently being dealt with, and I'll hand you over to Andrew to take you through a little more of the detail within our report. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Chair. We're here to present, or well, I'm here to present the 23-24 annual audit report, and this just details our audit work over the annual accounts and the wider scope issues today. I don't intend to go through the papers page by page, but I would like to highlight the following key points. Page 111 of the committee papers highlights the work we have performed over the significant audit risks we identified during our audit planning. These related to valuation of the pension scheme, management override controls, and the risk of fraud and expenditure recognition. For management override and fraud and expenditure, we performed detailed audit testing on these areas and can confirm that no issues were identified through the audit work carried out. And as already been mentioned, the initial work carried out on pensions did not identify any issues. Nestrans had applied an asset ceiling which limited the pension asset to zero. However, as mentioned by Tina, due to the nationwide issue on the calculation over pension figures, we've asked the finance team to request updated actual reports where secondary contributions are not considered in perpetuity. We will assess the updated actual reports provided by Mercer once available and then be able to confirm whether any updates are required to the accounts. Page 121 of the papers documents our work in relation to wider scope. Now, as a less complex body, we applied the wider scope audit exemption to our audit in Nestrans, meaning that we are only required to review the annual governance statement and financial sustainability. So, linked to the detailed work on financial sustainability, we have raised 2 wider scope audit recommendations at Appendix 2 and followed up 1 prior year audit recommendation at Appendix 3. So these related to the need to implement a medium-term financial strategy, the fact that the business plan for 24-25 needs to be prepared and approved, and that projected interest income for the year should feed into budget considerations. At page 125 of the papers, it also confirms we did not identify any monetary audit adjustments during the audit. This could change pending the review of the updated pension figures from the actuary. At page 126, this identifies the disclosure changes made during the audit. There were no significant issues identified. However, there was 1 development point raised in relation to how performance information is disclosed in the management commentary, and Nestrans are going to look at that for future years. Page 127 of the papers confirms the 1 other audit recommendation identified during the audit relating to the implementation of IFRS 16. 24-25 will be the first year IFRS 16 will apply for Nestrans, and the finance team just need to make sure that it understands the full accounting requirements of the new updated guidance. And page 132 confirms our final audit fee for the 23-24 audit. And just to confirm, there were no changes from the fee agreed as part of the audit plan presented earlier this year. So that concludes my summary of the annual audit report. Happy to take any questions on any point or recommendation made. Before that, just like to thank Tina, Ella, the rest of the team at Nestrans for their help throughout the audit process and for, as Angela said, chasing up the pensions issue quickly for us.
Okay, thank you for that. Do members have any questions either for Tina or Angela or Andrew? I'm seeing no hands come up. I will say I've come back to the change in recommendation of for item 1. I've actually just queried item 4 as well, just the wording on that and just its intent. Because it says note that the accounts can be accessed and downloaded free of charge. That is obviously once the accounts are completed. Are members happy to accept the recommendations as set out on the screen here and explained? Agreed? Okay. Item 3.2, 24-25 budget matters. Jenny, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. This report is to provide the Board with an update on the 2024-2025 budget monitoring and to consider any issues that may arise. Appendix 1 sets out a summary statement of income and expenditure, and this shows spend to the end of August at just over £912,000. The forecast outturns are also shown and have been updated to reflect some projects that are known to be coming in under budget or not progressing this financial year, and this is the basis for some environments that are later proposed. Appendix 2 gives a more detailed breakdown of the spend to date against the individual projects being funded via the People in Place grant, along with the grant income that has been received by end of August. The Board agreed at the last meeting to use the Strategic Transport Fund monies that are still held to support sustainable transport schemes in the vicinity of the location of the developments that made the payments. 4 projects within this year's budget are considered as being relevant for using STF monies, and the suggested allocations and revised budget, should this be approved, are shown in Appendix 3. The remaining STF monies not yet allocated will be continued to be held for use at a later date when appropriate schemes have been identified and can be delivered, and when any alternative external funded sources such as developer obligation monies have already been maximised. Further recommendations will therefore be brought forward for any unallocated STF monies for consideration by the Board at the appropriate time. Due to some project-specific variances indicated within the forecasts and the additional funding that's available through the use of the STF monies, if this is agreed, a number of environment proposals are presented in Appendix 4 for consideration. In conclusion, the Board has been asked to note the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1, note the monitoring position and forecast for People in Place projects presented in Appendix 2, approve the allocation of STF monies set out in Appendix 3, and approve the environment proposed in Appendix 4. And thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions on this report.
Do you have any questions or comments for Jenny? Members? Councillor Davidson. Isabel, please.
Yeah, it was really a question about budget management, I guess, as much as anything. So there's lots of, this is an end of August report, so 5 months into the year, and there's a lot of work to do. Are you expecting to have most of these projects complete by the end of the financial year, or are they longer going projects? It would be quite good to have some sort of dates on them. So I think we said that before, and I know there's another paper further on, but it's not clear whether these are 1-year projects or 2-year projects, or if it is expected to spend the money by the end of the financial year. And maybe we need to have that assurance that that's going to happen, because there's a lot of outstanding projects here that need to move on.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the budget is set for projects that should be delivered this financial year. I'm sure you'll be aware of carry forwards that we've had to request in the past where, for whatever reason, if it's land difficulties, resource issues, projects may have continued, but the budget that was set at the start of the year was meant to be delivered by the end of March, but we have already come across some issues where projects are known now not to be progressing, and that's the reason for the variants that are suggested in Appendix 4 to try and put forward a budget that should be delivered this year.
Okay, Isabel?
Yeah, I guess so. And as I said, there is another paper, and there will be more meetings this year that we can carry on monitoring this.
Rahab, please. Yes.
If it's helpful, can I draw your attention to Appendix 1 on page 141, which gives the current budget, the allocation which has actually been spent to the end of August, and then the 24-25 projected forecast or projected outcome. So it's almost at a glance you can see, yeah, there are some projects which we haven't been billed for yet, but it gives an indication of which ones we think will be fully built out or expended during the current financial year. So hopefully that's a quick opportunity to see the main summary of that.
Yeah, that's the paper I was really looking at. I just wasn't sure that we're, halfway through the year almost, whether we were going to get there or not, but you're confident we are, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
Certainly confident at this stage. Okay, with that, I don't see any other hands with comments, questions. So I will bring everybody back to the recommendations that are set out on page 140, and we content to accept those recommendations. Agreed? Okay. Item 3.3 is the 5-year plan, and it's Rab that's presenting that.
Thank you, Chair. I probably should say our first attempt at a 5-year plan, if I'm being honest, because it's one that I feel will develop over time as we learn more about the projects. And it's probably really relevant to the discussion we've just had about anticipated outcomes and projected and forecasted spends. It was something that was requested as part of last year's audit, that we have a more medium-term indicative budget and indicative financial programme going forward, and provides a framework for longer-term planning and budget planning in particular. Although the regional transport strategy is a wide-ranging proposal with actions and schemes that are proposed by a number of partners, obviously including Transport Scotland, the local authorities, the councils, Nestrans and private operators, I've focused the 5-year plan really on Nestrans' anticipated income and anticipated spend. There are a number of projects at the moment which are being delivered either through the City Region deal. We've just mentioned the Strategic Transport Fund, and there are some carry forwards of budget from previous years. Including all of them, I've come to a programme of something in the order of nearly £30 million over a 5-year period, which is about the scale of spend that we have currently. I think what it does show, though, is as we get to the later years, potentially there is a shortfall in funding if contributions are capped or even reduced, and if there is an expectation that we will continue to deliver the types of services at the level that we currently do, and if the aspirations and ambitions of the regional transport strategy are to be fully built out. So there's an early warning that we're aiming maybe higher than we currently have the budget to deliver. I think, therefore, there's a need for a more detailed delivery plan, and I think that's something we would like to take away, work on, and bring back to a future board. So the recommendations are that we consider the contents of the report and appendix, that we note the implications of the ongoing budget situation, instruct officers to bring back a more detailed delivery plan to a future meeting, and approve Appendix A at this stage as an indicative 5-year plan. Happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you.
Councillor Cox. John, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Rob. As you'll probably expect, it'll bring up the A947 upgrade, the Banff Bridge and the Banff Active Bridge. Where does that sit in terms of this plan now? I appreciate what you're saying about funding, but if it drops off the cliff, then we're not going to be sort of shovel ready if future funding does come along. So I apologise if it's in the small print, which I haven't noticed, but clearly the A947 is something that's been ongoing for a number of years. Banff Bridge, quite a strategic, important part of the North Coast, and then the Active Bridge, recognising, yes, we haven't been successful but that doesn't mean the project drops off. So welcome your comments, please.
Yeah, not hidden in the small print because I haven't gone down to that level of detail. What I've looked at is the 18 themes within our regional transport strategy and tried to put indicative figures against each of these 18 themes. So the active travel is theme number 1, and there is a significant budget listed against that. We'll come on to discuss about the regional active travel network in a later paper at 5.2. The A947, there is discussion and there is a theme around improving road safety. So again, there's an indicative budget in, but not specific to any individual scheme. So I think these are details that we need to come back to the board. Again, it would still be indicative, but starting to think about schemes and proposals rather than just budget lines and headings. So that would form part of the delivery plan going forward.
John, you content for now?
Yeah, I appreciate that response, which is just, yeah, that's fine. It's the detail, the devil in the detail, as I say, but I just thought it would be important to raise it. But now we've got an answer, that would be the most practical way forward is once we go into the detail. I'm concerned that, other projects might come along. Listening to the radio the other day, understand they're all important, but clearly the ones I've been talking about have been on the go for a long time, and we have to ensure there are resources there to take it to the level where they can be shovel ready. But fully thank Rob for his response to my question. Thank you.
Sandra, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was wondering about the resource of our staff, and has the assumptions that have gone into the bigger thinking, because obviously budgets come and go, and we don't all have a crystal ball, and we know that budgets can be put on ice or even chucked out the window without much consultation. So am I correct in thinking that it'd be the same shape of organisation over the 5 years that you would be working up with all the different projects and so on?
That's the thinking and the assumptions we put in here at the moment. If there was to be a reduction in funding, we may need to bring forward proposals to cope with that. On page 162, there is an indicative potential spend, I've called it, and you can see there that the partnership office and staff consists of about just less than half of the revenue spend. So I guess I would assume, but it would be further discussions required, that if there was to be any reduction in budget, it's probable, and I would hope that it would be project development that would be dropped off the list first, rather than losing the people and the capability that we've got. We're obviously looking at how we can reduce costs. We're currently discussing about potential office accommodation, for example, and thinking of ways that we can reduce costs. I should say that the income from Transport Scotland and the local authorities has been what I call flatlined or capped for about 7 or 8 years. Obviously, there has been significant inflationary pressures, both in terms of project development, but also in terms of nationally agreed salary increases, etc. Costs of accommodation have gone up, electricity, etc. So that's what I mean by I don't think it's sustainable long term if we maintain income at a flat level but expect to get more from it. There's going to have to be difficult decisions made. I don't think my assumptions are that there would be major changes, but we'll need to look at how we can square that circle.
Thank you very much, and I think we are expecting all our staff and all the partner organisations as well to do more for less, but also to do things differently to enable organisations to transform. And I would hope that Nestrans wouldn't want to just flatline, but would want to grow and to, to be the leading transport authority that it is. And so one of the things that, I would like to see is that we do try to bring in staff who, whether it's apprenticeships or whatever, because I think that's probably the best way of growing those transport experts of the future that we desperately need in the North East, because it's becoming a smaller pool of resources. We've certainly over the years in Nestrans noticed and been aware of that in terms of not just just all those skills, but particularly those transport skills as we move into the newer world of active travel and so on. It's very different from the roads engineers of the past. So it was just to flag that up, to be aware of those sorts of feelings, certainly from me on the board, and I would imagine from others on the board too, about the worth of Nestrans and how we would want to see it developing, not just functioning, but sustainably, but also developing over the next 5 years. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, and it's certainly something that we're very aware of. It's actually a national issue about people coming into transport, and it's something that Scots, the society, has been very aware of nationally about the number of people coming into the industry. Both you and Paul are very involved nationally in the Scots organisation. In terms of efficiencies, if I can just mention two things, that we work very closely with our two local authorities, as I know you know, but I think we're all about making sure that there isn't duplication, but that there's collaboration and making sure that the three authorities are working as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can, and therefore it's all about additionality for best value. And the last one I would just mention is that we try and maximise and have had a successful record in bringing external funding by making sure that we're able to put our budgets where we can get match funding from national organisations, for example. Again, I know probably you know that, but I'd just like to emphasise it. So thank you.
Okay, I'm just having a look before I jump in. Just one question. You've referenced in obviously the recommendations, bring a delivery plan back to a future meeting. I am just wondering what sort of timescale you're thinking of for bringing that back.
Thanks for that, Chair. I'm going to plead poverty and say that we have been very understaffed over the last 8 months. We've got Caroline has joined us at the start of this month, and she's here for our first meeting. And we've got a new start, I think, starting on Monday of next week, so we'll be up to full capacity. So that's not answering your question, but what I'm trying to say is we'll be back up to full speed from Monday, and I'm really optimistic that we will get kicking on with that, and maybe hopefully by about the end of the financial year, maybe the second meeting of next year would be a good target. I'm looking at Paul, who's just said kittens, I think. But
You've been name checked, Paul. What are you thinking?
I think that's a reasonable target time for Chair.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of the discussion here, etc., and obviously conscious of the fact that we don't know what the budgets could be for next year and everything. I didn't want to bring it too early, but at the same time, as John's pointed out, I didn't want to leave it too long either. So fine, second meeting of next year is a good target. If it slips a meeting or so, it's understood. Just we do have an understanding of when you're thinking. Okay, I see no more hands, so with that I take it we're content to accept the recommendations as set out on page 150, I think it is off the top of my head here. Yes, agreed, okay. So item 4.1 is the Director's Report. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a very busy period. Shall I mention again that we've been understaffed? But I don't think we've let any of the balls drop. We have been getting through the business and hopefully bringing reports back to the board in a timeous manner. A list of meetings that we've held recently that I thought would be of interest to the board, and if I could pick up, I usually pick up a couple that I think are of particular note. We had a visit by Alison Irvine, who's the interim chief executive at Transport Scotland. I was accompanied by David and Ewan, and she was accompanied by Fiona Brown, who's her director of transportation. We had a good walk around the city centre in the rain, and we then had a drive out to Kintore where it was glorious sunshine. Ewan made particular note of this, but it was actually a really useful day with two very influential people at Transport Scotland. I think they were very impressed with the work and particularly the collaboration that, as I say, the three organisations speaking with a single voice. And it was the first time Alison had seen some of the projects. We walked through Union Terrace Gardens. She was very impressed with the city centre and the changes that have taken place. It was the first time she'd been on the Western Peripheral route, which she'd heard an awful lot about. And I think it was the first time she'd been out to Kintore railway station. So a really useful day. We had lovely ice cream at the Forest Farm. And I think it's something we would like to do again in the future going forward. The other one I was going to mention was that Councillor Turner and I were down in Fife at the RTP chairs meeting last month, and I thought a useful meeting, very much a bus focus, and I think going forward they're going to try and do themed meetings, although we do talk about everything under the sun at these meetings as well. But those two, I think, were of particular note, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I got lost out in not getting ice cream, but no, I would agree. It was a good meeting down in Fife. Okay, so with that we'll move on to item 4.2, which is a public oh, sorry, I missed. Apologies, I missed it.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask. There were a couple of meetings there that were mentioned, but obviously came out after the report. And I just wondered about those programme meetings, particularly the one about rail. I'm still concerned about our connectivity, and also the traffic management roundtable on the 17th of September as well, if there was any update for the board.
I will bring Paul in with the two rail meetings that have been held recently. The roundtable, I was invited to accompany officers from the City Council, one of the co-leaders and Councillor Radley were in attendance with business interests. I think it was a very open meeting, but obviously it was in advance of the committee, which will be, I think, 2nd of October, which will actually be considering the matters around the bus gates and city centre traffic management. Paul.
So there's been two rail meetings. There's a sort of a quarterly rail update meeting we have with the operators and Network Rail, and then subsequently in the following week there was a meeting about the Aberdeen to Central Belt upgrade stakeholder meeting. The first meeting, Rail Quarterly meeting, we were able to bring together a forum of ScotRail, LNER, cross-country trains, Network Rail and Transport Scotland. Some positive news was around the progression of some of the industrial relations which have been affecting the timetable out of Aberdeen, and there was positive news that they were seeing a progression to seeing the easing of that temporary timetable and hopefully moving to the North Standard timetable, they hope towards October time during that sort of period. Also, some very good news from the other operators about the collaboration they're doing with the city's events team about looking forward to the Tall Ships event and the event planning around that. LNER have been particularly proactive around that one, but also supported by ScotRail. There's obviously some challenges on the rail network as well, which were discussed. Cross-country trains are having to withdraw from Aberdeen, at least one of their services, just because of driver shortages. We also had the news recently of the removal of the peak fares pilot from ScotRail, which majoritarily affects the central belt more than the northeast, but still is an issue for some people commuting into the northeast. Although I understand that they've made some mitigations in terms of the cost of season tickets going forward. There's some other items which I'll probably come on to when I talk about the rail update paper going on, but I think they're the points from that rail quarterly that weren't covered in that update. The other item as well was around the Aberdeen to Central Belt upgrade. Again, I make mention of that in the rail update paper which is coming on, we're coming on to, but that was a reaffirmation that at the current time, despite progression with the outline business case and despite progression with the design works, which is fully funded this year and next year, the funding that has been previously indicated for actual implementation of that scheme, there is no particular programme for that implementation funding, and we have to keep on pressurising Transport Scotland amongst these budget pressures that they're facing across the capital portfolio of transport investment as to how and when that would be realised. And I do believe that the Cabinet Secretary has asked for a review of how that could be delivered, but that review is ongoing and we probably won't know the outcome of that review until some point later in the next financial year.
Okay, Sandra.
Thank you. And for those who, and no spoiler alerts, please, for those who are watching the Night Sleeper rail story that's going on at the moment, I think it's brought rail travel into a different dimension to the public. So it is quite a gripping tale if you haven't been watching it.
Councillor Ian, please.
Well, first on Night Sleeper, it's great. I've watched it through, but suspend disbelief because it's like no train journey I've ever seen. Thanks, Chair. It was the mention of ice cream that triggered this question, but, well, not entirely, to be honest, but the fact that you'd been out and about. And it struck me that it might be, at some point, I'm not saying do it next month or anything, but at some point it might be interesting to take the board out and about. I mean, I don't get out much, so anything is a day out for me. But out and about to visit some of the projects that Nestrans has been involved with, or is going to be involved with. I mean, I know the city reasonably well. Don't know large parts of Aberdeenshire nearly so well, and I suspect others will be in the same position. But I would certainly find that interesting if there's a budget that would cover it. So perhaps something maybe yourself and the Vice Chair and the Director could have a conversation about. Actually, I'm not suggesting we do it instantly, and perhaps sometime when the weather's getting on the warmer side again might be best. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, yeah, we can take that away. I think obviously the challenge, as you're well aware, will be fitting it into people's diaries as well. That's not the easiest thing. And yeah, so the warmer weather might actually suit better just looking at my own diary over the next month or so. But yeah, we can certainly take that.
Certainly, if ice cream's involved, it has to be warmer weather.
Well, we'll keep it back on transport instead of ice cream, so I would talk all day on ice cream. Okay, so noted. We'll take that as an action to come back. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so we will, this time we will move on to item 4.2, which is, I've just went and just took it off my screen. Public Services Reform, Information, Publications, and it's Jenny. It's going to be taking us through this.
Chair, not nearly as interesting as ice cream, I'm afraid, this report. But the purpose is to allow the board to consider the information that's suggested for publication for 2023-24 in accordance with the Public Services Reform Scotland Act. 3 statements are required to be published, and the draft expenditure statement is contained in Appendix 1. It's based upon information from finance staff in Aberdeenshire Council on all gross payments made by Nestrans in the period from 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March 2024. Nestrans staff then consider which of the payments throughout the year fall within the stipulated items for publication, and follow the guidance that as much information as possible should be published, and to interpret the duties widely rather than narrowly. It's also necessary when expenditure falls under more than one category to report it under each heading, and so comments been added to draw attention to where this is applicable. Appendix 2 contains the draft Sustainable Economic Growth Statement, which summarises the steps taken throughout the 23-24 financial year to promote and increase sustainable growth through the exercise of Nestrans functions. Appendix 2 contains the draft Efficiency, Effectiveness and Economy Statement that contains the steps taken throughout the year to improve them and the exercise of Nestrans functions, the items that you were probably discussing, Councillor MacDonald, were up in the previous 5-year plan. The Board has therefore been asked to approve publication of these statements for 23-24 on the Nestrans website to comply with the requirements of the Act, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions the Board may have on the suggested publications. Thank you.
Do you have any comments or questions? No, I'm not seeing any, so take it we're content with supporting the recommendation and publishing those statements. Yes. Okay. Okay. Item 4.3, the Regional Transport Network Climate Resilience and Adaptation. It's Mr. Finch-Paul. Can you take us through this, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a brief update report. You will recall that in December last year we presented a report to the Board just reflecting on the regional experiences of Storm Babette and the flooding that occurred south of Aberdeenshire and Angus, but which had significant impact on the network in the northeast. And since then we've used that experience, and we've also reflected on a range of different policy documents that have coming out in terms of UK climate change risk assessment, the National Adaptation Plan, and also some work Transport Scotland are doing. We've undertaken more sort of focused discussions over the last few months, particularly in this area, because I guess we believe this is of strategic importance to the region. We've had a good discussion with Network Rail, discussing the resilience plans for their rail network and their future adaptation plans, and how they're getting themselves ready for adaptation, and the risk approach that they're taking, and the increasing focus of maintenance and renewals on drainage, vegetation removal, and identifying those parts of the network which are most vulnerable to flooding. We've also met with the lead officers on climate adaptation to discuss what progress is made on this locally, and we've been particularly probing around that wider regional infrastructure piece, and that's around the rail and the road network. It also includes the electricity transmission networks, for example, and the mobile phone networks. Just that wider infrastructure vulnerability that the area may be vulnerable to. And obviously we support the net zero and adaptation boards both in Aberdeen and Aberdeen City Council. We've also been active in initial members of the Climate Ready Infrastructure Forum, both in April and in September as well. And we found that quite a useful networking opportunity to understand across different infrastructure providers how they're bringing this work together, and increasing focus on looking at this on a regional and national level. We've also had positive discussions with Transport Scotland in this area as well. I guess through the engagement that we've taken place, we found that there's been really strong progress within each local authority, particularly on resilience, flooding, and issues around there. But what appears, there's a bit of a regional gap in terms of the North East Scotland picture, as opposed to Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City, particularly as the strategic transport network straddles both the local authority areas, but is beyond that as well. And what we're seeing is that if we don't start thinking about this more, there is that highly damaging disruption and negative consequences. And we have seen the impacts of some of that recently, both in Europe and around the Birmingham area as well. The evolving proposal we have is to try and work up to a risk assessment exercise on the strategic network, not necessarily led by Nestrans, but trying to encourage other partners to be part of that. And certainly Transport Scotland on their trunk road corridors are keen to look at that. And I don't think it would be too difficult to encourage Network Rail as well to pool resources to look at this. So I'm thinking here about a piece of work that we might want to be doing next financial year, both in that short-term period as well, but also just to quantify that risk and work out what the mitigation adaptation plans might be around that. And just to add as well that obviously climate change reporting is something as a statutory body we do, and we'll be bringing the report to the next board on that. But increasingly that climate change reporting is not necessarily just looking at the emissions that we are making, but also the adaptation activities. So this work very much fits into that piece as well. So there's just some recommendations there about noting the content of the report, just notice that recent engagement we're ongoing, ask the board to support our ongoing work with local and national partners in this area as well, and also to support opportunities as we're able to engender them to work jointly with other local, regional and national stakeholders to progress regional risk mapping and adaptation plans with a focus on the strategic regional transport network. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Do members have any questions or comments for Paul on that? Okay, I guess I've got one. In the proposal, are you looking to lead it or just to participate in what would be different risk assessments? Obviously, you mentioned two there from one. The roads, and you've mentioned the rail.
I think there's an opportunity as Nestrans to bring a partnership together, and I think that both Network Rail and Transport Scotland are doing this work on a national level at the moment. So it's a case to create that space and that forum where that national work can be combined, taking a little bit more regional, and we can interpret it there. So the work is being done at a national level, and I think there's a willingness amongst the partners to create, perhaps our role would be to create the kitchen table into which other people can be invited in for that piece of work, if that analogy lands with you on that one. So that's what I'm trying to, through the discussions I'm having, trying to engender with these different partners.
Okay, I'm fine with that. It was just when I take it to the next stage, when it comes to the roads, yes, we've got Transport Scotland, but I'm assuming, when it comes to, say, the local authorities, you're bringing them in as well, because what we saw was basically everything was knocked out.
Yes, you're completely right, particularly the vulnerable structures as well. In terms, it wasn't just the trunk road structure, it was the domino effect on the local roads, bridges as well, and that communication piece, which was getting the communications correct at that particular time as well, was particularly interesting, and that wider liaison with other public transport operators, not just rail. So yeah, we've had those discussions, and perhaps I was using shorthand there, but yes, it's important to bring those key infrastructure providers together and build on the work that's already been done, but just trying to reframe it on that regional level as well, not just specific, that local community level.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. With that, we're content to accept the recommendations I'll ask the board. Yes? Agreed? Okay. And I just wonder, item 4.4, I'll note Maggie's going to have to leave. It's okay, that's fine. I was aware of that. Just give you 1 minute. Okay. Item 4.4, the monitoring report dashboard. Rab, please.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4.4 is a monitoring report dashboard. Members will recall that we had a report at the 26th of June board meeting where we provided a full monitoring and evaluation report. At that time, it was asked whether a summary might be useful, and we have pulled together what we're referring to as a dashboard, which highlights in a colour-coded way the key indicators. There are 21 indicators which reflect the aspects in our regional transport strategy, and I think it's really impressive that 14 of these we seem to be progressing towards. Some of them are really significant ones: road safety, i.e. a reduction in casualty numbers; behaviour change, people driving less and less dependent on cars; and carbon emissions and air quality improvements that have been seen since we established the baseline. There are a couple which maybe aren't doing as well as we would have hoped for. Rail journey times, for example, although we know that that's going to take significant investment to make the types of change that we are aspiring towards within the period of the regional strategy. So it's there for members' information, hopefully much clearer and much easier to get the main thrust of what was intended through the full monitoring report, and something maybe we could publicise in this form if members are happy with it, but happy to take any comments, questions, particularly about the presentation, and but obviously the elements that are within the monitoring indicators as well. Thank you.
Just taking a look, see if there's any comments or questions from anyone. Sandra, please.
Very much. So it was just to try and understand, well, just to, when you look at the dashboard, that there seemed to me, and you had to kind of look for it, two greens. So there was a bright green and not quite so bright green, and there was a bright orange and a not so bright orange. And so when we look at the overall picture, at the top, we're saying 14 are very green, whereas in fact, you know, some of them are not that green. But my issue, I guess, is that we're so comparing apples and pears in some of the categories, and some of the margins are so small that it could move fairly quickly from one category into the other. But overall, I have to say it's easier on the eye and easier to understand than just a text. But it would be good to not, for those of us in Nestrans who know the regional transport strategy and know what we're trying to do and so on is one thing. It would be really good to get a outsider's point of view on the dashboard, who you know, perhaps doesn't have that complete understanding. But you know, that I think will probably come with time, and it is something that will presumably you know, be improved or tweaked as required. So happy to go with it, but it is still, you know, it still probably could be improved in one or two little respects like that, just for people's understanding.
Thanks for the comments, and yeah, I mean, it might be that what we want to do is put this out, but as you say, maybe see if we get reaction and whether it's possible to improve it for future years, for example. As you say, some of the margins are quite small. Obviously, our strategy is to 2040. Most of the information that we're working on now, although we call it a 24 update, a lot of it is 2022 information. So not an awful long period of time since the baseline. we're also very aware that between the baseline and 2022, we had a major pandemic, which sort of restarted everything. I think 2020 numbers were obviously very down in terms of traffic and people moving about, and that impacted on air quality, it impacted on casualty numbers. And we have seen a creep back up in terms of some of these, but still below the baseline. So it's difficult to project, are we doing well because we're still down on our baseline, or are we increasing through 21, 22, 23? I think next year's monitoring evaluation report will be the interesting one to see whether the pandemic was a thing of the past, or whether we've got a new base from which we're working. But thanks for the comments, and I'd be really interested to hear, as you say, an outsider's view. Does this make sense to someone who maybe isn't as aware of what we're trying to achieve as others? Thank you.
If I may, I'll make a comment or two. Whenever I see percentages, and I'll take it in relation here to the bus users' satisfaction, I always wonder how many people have actually, provided that actual response. If they were saying 49% baseline to 2019, you just tend to wonder what sort of number is against that. And it's fine just now, but when you sit and you look about it, go ahead of time, forward in time, I should say, getting up to the targets is going to be difficult when it comes back to value for money and everything. And also, I would completely agree with what Sandra said on apples and pears. I would say it would be very different, the city, to what is the Shire in some respects when it comes to buses. But I'm happy also to content to go with what we've got at the moment. I don't see any other hands, so yes, I take it we're all content to accept and agree it. Okay. Takes us on to item 5.1, the Active Travel Action Plan update. Paul, Mr. French, please.
Thank you very much. This commences a run of active travel papers we've got coming up. The purpose of this report is to present a draft regional active travel action plan for the consideration and comment by the Nestrans Board. The input of the board will be used to help finalise the drafting of the document prior to approval and publication. In section 2, I've set out the policy context for what we're trying to achieve, which will be well ingrained within the Nestrans Board, the regional transport strategy, the policy context at national level, including across the transport, planning and public health arenas, but also at the local level in terms of the recently adopted council plan, but also the commitments that are in Aberdeen City Council's partnership agreement, local improvement plan, and across the community planning activities as well, which both the public sector is very much involved with. In terms of the active travel plan, I would highlight that we've previously set out a regional framework, or perhaps informally a jigsaw, for active travel development in our area, inclusive of consideration of resources, governance, funding, policy, network planning, investment programme, which includes infrastructure and behaviour change. The ACTRAP forms a key element of the policy piece, although wider progression of active travel relies on attention across all the elements of that jigsaw piece. The Regional Active Travel Plan provides prioritised actions to fulfil the active travel elements of our regional transport strategy, responding to the national local policy agenda and our local requirements. The original ACTRAP was published in 2014. Most elements within that 2014 continue to be relevant. It was a very well-written document, but obviously the policy, funding, implementation framework has evolved significantly since then. So we believe we've produced an important but practical expression of regional active travel policy and priority actions, and having this up to date helps focus, guide local and regional resource, guide future strategic decisions, but also grasp hold of national funding allocations. We've provided a draft summary document in Appendix A. This is essentially an 8-page summary document focusing on the key aspects of the action plan cutting to the chase, if you will. A longer version does exist, and we've very much almost completed that, but we wanted to bring this short, precise summary to the board for their comment before finalising the whole document. We would hope that we'll be able to bring that to the subsequent board, ideally in November, but perhaps into the first meeting of 2025. In parallel, both local authorities have expressed their willingness to adopt this as part of their LTS processes, reflecting a regional approach to active travel development and delivery. So the recommendations are to note the progression of the documentation as one part of the active travel work that we're doing. Really happy to get comments and feedback on the summary documentation that we've presented, and then to instruct the director to present the finalised act track to the subsequent meeting of the Nestrans Board. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Councillor Davidson. Isabel, please.
Yeah, it's really good to see this, but I think it's really important to get as much information as well about what difference it's making, and certainly in towns and cities, I do think it makes a significant difference. But I think it's less in rural areas where people find it quite difficult to travel by work by active travel routes. They tend to live a good bit away, and even getting to, buses and trains by active travel isn't always so simple. So more data about productivity and outcomes would be really useful. But the other problem that we have at the moment, especially this year because it's been warm and the vegetation is very lush, we are not able to maintain these routes as well as we would like to. A lot of them, the older ones in particular, are getting very overgrown, and we just can't look after them. So that needs to be taken into account as well about, the future maintenance of these routes if we want to keep them useful and wide enough to be proper active travel routes.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Davison. I think that the policy requirement for active travel, or opportunities for active travel, and sometimes that requires new infrastructure, and sometimes that just requires addressing some of the constraints that might already exist. I think the policy context for that is strong, whether you're in the rural or the urban areas, but just the expression of that might change. So we, across all communities, we do want people to be more active. We want people to be able to, and not necessarily cycle, but definitely walk in their communities. And we definitely want to see how well we can provide those aspects. And obviously, this forms an important part of the planning considerations around local living and sort of connected communities as well. I'd certainly take your point on maintenance, and particularly at this time of year, that can be very prevalent because you've just had that growth of bushes and obstructing sometimes footpaths, cycleways, and whatever, and that's always going to be a challenge, particularly at these times when there's revenue constraint as well, and we need to see how we can best overcome that, although the answers aren't necessarily straightforward or obvious. But the point you make about data is important, and we certainly note the point about the importance of maintenance, which has been made many times in different forums as well. Thank you.
Isabel, do you want to come back?
Yeah, it's just on that data thing, I think we should be carrying out surveys regularly, and it speaks in here about people counters, but they just give you an idea of how many people are passing rather than the purpose and outcome. So before we're investing more and more in these, which I think is a really good thing, I do think we need that data to back it up.
Yeah, and again, I think we have quite a few elements towards the end, perhaps items 27 to 30, focus on that monitoring and evaluation piece. And you're quite right, we probably can continue to do better with that. And actually that forms a funding stream in one of our people and place projects, which is listed in items paper 6.1. But it's a point well made. And I think we recognise that as well. But yes, data evaluation, understanding as best we can. But also, being aware that active travel is explicit across the council plan, and it is at the heart of place planning, and we have a strong policy direction to continue in that direction.
Okay, I'll take Councillor Cox next. John, please.
Yeah, thanks. The infrastructure that's required, say your report and you're showing road layouts and stuff like that, but if somebody's on a bike, certainly coming to the town centre, and I do see on the occasions half a dozen cyclists, but if they were to ask me where can I leave my bike, I wouldn't be able to tell them because I don't know if there are any places, and I'm not being parochial, but it's something we need to promote more and maybe look at partnership where people can facilitate, where people can leave bikes if they're going to spend some time in a locality. Is there anything in the report there emphasising that? Because it's fine having the roads, but ultimately people will want to stop, have a break, and maybe have to leave their bikes somewhere secure. It's just a general point. I'm not necessarily looking for an answer, so thank you.
I would say don't drift onto item 5.2 yet. We're still on item 5.1. But, yeah, in terms of infrastructure, informal rest areas are important as much as formal rest areas where people can lock up their bikes. We have item 15 on the action plan about continuing to invest in cycle parking at key locations, promote our travel grants across organisations, and also we can now increasingly work with the allocation we have in our People and Place programme to also look at cycle storage, be it Sheffield stands, be it under shelters, or be it lockers. And we have funding allocations this financial year, and hopefully in coming financial years, to really invest in that as well. So yeah, I'll direct you to specific lines in the action plan 15, 16, 17 around that parking area. We recognise the importance of being able to store your bike as well as own and use your bike. Thank you.
Okay, John, that's okay with you, is it?
Yeah, absolutely fine. I was just looking for some reference to that in that paper, but maybe I've just got it mixed up. Apologies, but it was just a reference. But good to hear the response. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll go on to Councillor Reid. Glenn, please.
Yeah, thanks, Alan, and thanks, Paul, for this this paper. A lot of good stuff in here. Touching on a couple of similar things to Councillor Davidson and Councillor Cox, it is harder out in rural communities with reactive travel and getting access, etc., and people feeling confident and safe, etc. And John mentioned about locking up once you actually get into town or whatever. One of the things I found when I went to the continent that's really quite successful in places like Holland and in Belgium is that they joined up thinking whereby if you're in a rural community, you would cycle to a bus stop. That bus stop would actually have a place to lock your bike up there. You would then get on the bus and then you'd go into wherever you're going, etc. Is there anywhere in the plan that we've got an idea for like integrated infrastructure whereby you can join up everything, so people living 2-3 miles outside on a country road, we may designate in the future that it's a quiet road, would feel safe enough to cycle into the town, then they can lock up their bike because a lot of our buses won't be able to take bikes with them, and then they can actually get into town. I might have missed this in the plan, but
I think it's a great idea, and it's a great element of how we can really integrate active travel with the public transport network. We know the public transport network can't go everywhere, and if we can help develop those safe routes to those public transport nodes, and we can take that one forward. One of the lines in the action plan does relate to the development of mobility hubs, or line 14 on page 218, deliver active travel or mobility hubs across the regions at key destinations, transport interchanges to promote the use of active travel for first or last mile journeys, etc. So I think that would be a really interesting area to do. Aberdeenshire Council are currently looking at various models for that, and I'm aware of work that we're currently funding in the Crathes area as well, which integrates public transport, cycle facilities as well, so people from that communities can then access onto that bus network as well. The City Region Deal Strategic Transport Allocation also has some funding around looking at these micro mobility hubs, And again, I think that concept fits really well to what you've described there. It also overlays with where we might want to invest. Now we know the planned routes of Aberdeen Rapid Transit as well. And again, that may well provide some clues as to interchange points or access points to that network, which would be particularly suitable for formal or informal cycle storage facilities there. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think that we are well placed to progress that.
Glenn, okay?
Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
Okay. Miranda, thank you for waiting, please.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome the action plan, and I think it's very clear around where we're going in the sort of short term. And I guess it's maybe not a question for this version of the action plan, but maybe when we come to refresh it, there aren't any sort of long-term ambitions within the plan. There's a lot of ongoing, a lot of short, and a handful of medium, but there's not that sort of understanding of sort of the wider long-term actions that we need to take to get the modal shift and to get to where we want to be. So as I say, it's probably not one for this version of the plan, but maybe could be incorporated into future.
I think perhaps what we've tried to do is to list things that we have a confidence that there's a delivery pathway to, and show progress and be able to start linking this to funding programs that we've got some confidence about around there. I think that longer piece is really important, and I think that when you see the bigger document, obviously I've just gone down to the 8-page summary, we have got quite a lot about that, not only the policy context, but that regional piece. And I think it's important that we go back to that longer document and actually make sure that that longer term ambition, but the routes to achieve that longer term ambition are expressed. Perhaps not in this this table, but I think there's a narrative around there which would be useful as well. But it's a point well made, and thank you very much for that point.
Content with that for now. Thank you. Okay, I see no further. Oh, sorry. Apologies. That's twice, Sandra. My apologies. Please.
Yeah, thank you. I've commented initially really around both this report at 5.1, but also, you know, and Paul kind of alluded to it moving into the regional active travel network at 5.2, but even in 6.1, where we're talking about active travel update, the people in place program, it's quite difficult sometimes to know where to pitch what you're thinking at a particular, you know, report and so on. So I'm going to hold on to what I was thinking, but what the question I'm going to ask around this particular report at 5.1 was more around the comms and the comms around it. So we've got all the brackets of infrastructure and even behavioural change and so on. But I just wondered if there was a need for in the plan somewhere to do a little bit of you know, that kind of comms engagement element, just to make sure that there's a wraparound around some of that action plan, and maybe that's in the bigger picture, and we don't have it just here in front of us today. But I think that's something that's maybe a little bit lacking in the plan too.
Yeah, I think I welcome that comment, and that's something that we can reflect on. It is important, as well as the actual actions, which people continually ask us to prove what you're doing, but you know, show us the action on the ground, if you see what I mean, and not just talk about it. But it's also important to talk, if we are putting things on the ground and we've got plans in place, to actually to be able to clearly communicate that. And I know that's been expressed by other members of the board previously as well. So yes, I think that's something that across the piece, we may not be able to find the correct mechanism for doing that. I think we're quite confident on the monitoring and evaluation piece. I think we're quite good on some of that infrastructure planning piece, the behaviour change piece. Perhaps it fits into that behaviour change piece, and how we use the Get About brand to talk about this swathe of work that we are working through at the moment. So thank you.
Happy enough, Sandra? Okay, with that, I see no more hands up, so I will take us back to what the recommendations are, and are we all content to accept the recommendations as they're set out on page 210? Agreed, yeah. Okay, the next one, it's Paul again. It's the Regional Active Travel Network. Outcomes from the consultation.
Again, thank you very much, Chair. I also have online Tim Steiner from Jacobs, who may help me with any questions that might come in as we go through this paper. The network presents work completed to date on the development of a regional active travel network for consideration and comment by the board and hopefully adoption and publication. Board members will have also been given access to the longer technical report that sits behind the executive summary that has been presented as part of this paper. We commenced this work in June 2023. Although led by Nestrans, it's had significant input from officers from both Aberdeen City Council and Aberdeenshire Council. We've tried to work very hard through the guidance that's provided nationally, including Cycling by Design, Designing Streets, and other relevant planning documents. We've tried to look very hard at the three distinct yet linked geographies of the Aberdeen city area, Aberdeenshire's main towns, and the regional active linkages between them in the Nestrans area. The outcomes from this study are predominantly plan-based, and we've provided a link to the GIS system which provides that plan. It's very difficult to show that on A4 bits of paper that come with the board papers. We want to use this plan to inform future projects and policy development, funding bids, and delivery priorities. We've also developed the work that takes into account the core public transport network, the roads hierarchy, and also our plans for ART. Whilst fulfilling a key element of our active travel delivery framework, this also responds to the specific requirements that Aberdeen City Council have and Aberdeenshire in terms of their respective local transport strategy processes and related committee instructions. So Appendix A presents the summary of the technical report and gives some suggested layouts or cross sections for how the different standards of the link might be realised. We want more people to walk, wheel and cycle more often, irrespective of journey purpose. And this infrastructure piece is part of the realisation of that. It's recognised that there's different standards of provision across different areas, and that can relate to quiet rural routes to perhaps the higher standard inner city core routes as well, where it's fully segregated. After developing the network in terms of working groups with the local authorities during the late summer, we undertook consultation on this. It took account of online surveys, questionnaires, stakeholder workshops, but also we undertook 4 research panels as well with 31 residents of Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. We tried to segment them so that they were broadly representative of the population. We also did work with young people in 2 or 3 schools in the area as well. And this whole activity was supported by wider communications, press and journal adverts, social media content, etc. The views on the overall draft regional transport network, we've got a broad range of stakeholders, diversity of opinions as well. Broadly, there's support for this, but concerns were expressed regarding the overall deliverability of the network and the cost implications. The issues of limited road space in many areas were raised by stakeholders, as well as the timescales for realising change, many realising this is a very long-term project. The stakeholders supported the network's principles and levels of aspiration, and certainly when we talked it through with the research panel participants, they got it, they understood what we were trying to do, and most agreeing that the level of ambition was about right. On the online surveys, it was true to say that there was a more mixed view, slightly greater proportion supporting the need for more action, but some saying the level of ambition was too little, some saying it was too much. There seemed to be a polarisation in terms of the online surveys around about that one. And also in terms of the consultation, it's difficult to get specific feedback for a concept that is a big, long picture regional project or ambition rather than something that's outside my back garden. There was that tension in terms of getting that discussion with people. We see this as an important planning tool. We'd like to make sure it's available. We see it feeding into development plans, development proposals. We see it being really useful when we look in more detail at individual areas. So we're not looking at a specific proposal, but we can look at the proposal in the wider context of the ambition that we have for the area. We want to keep this network plan live so we can keep on going back into it and refining as delivery commences, but as also we keep on doing more consultation and route development work in specific areas, realizing that that area work might not always be transport based, but it might be based around a new school or a healthcare development or wider planning considerations in a particular area. It would be very useful to see how the prospective long-term active travel plan might work in that particular context. We want to recommend to each of the two local authorities for their consideration within their local transport strategies, delivery plans, the plan. We recognise it is a long-term ambition, and we anticipate that both the local authorities will look at that plan, and they will then wish to apply further scrutiny of the plan in relation to prioritisation and phasing over the short to medium term, and particularly in respect to potential funding availabilities. This provides the opportunity to more clearly articulate an anticipated delivery pipeline of projects building on what we already have. The proposals were also commended for regional partners to support funding applications, future national assessments of our capacity and capability, and also facilitate that wider debate on active travel development with our stakeholders and partners, as an input to that comms piece that Sandra was just talking about. So it is recommended that the board note the progression of the regional active travel network and associated consultation, approve the technical documentation network plan for publication, support the adoption of the plan for both partner local authorities as part of their respective local transport strategy and active travel delivery plans, subject to further prioritisation and phasing, and also to support the maintenance of this site as a live document such that it can be regularly reviewed and gone back to and updated in the light of wider developments. Thank you for, look forward to the questions and discussion on this, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments on this for Paul? Board members. Sandra, please.
Thank you very much. I've got the network open in front of me, and it comes as no surprise, Chair, that in the bigger scheme of things, as networks have been developed, that the city is going to, in some people's eyes, benefit most from what's in front of us in terms of a regional strategy, but in some people's eyes, suffer as a result of it. And what I'd like to understand is, is it the feeling within Nestrans that it is the city that is going to have to make those bigger changes, if you like, going forward, in order to deliver what we need to ensure that our planet survives and that we change behaviours in our city, a very car-dependent city at the moment? Is that really underpinning what we do at the moment? And how are we going to ensure that the partners that Paul has just outlined really take that on board and understand it and act accordingly when it comes to looking at what's in here and then delivering what is needed probably in the report before at 5.1, because I think this is the report that Councillor Miranda was speaking about as a big, broad future, long-term vision. And if we can't get that right, it's always going to be difficult to make decisions locally that makes sense if we want to get the big picture right going forward. That was a bit of a rant, but I think there was a few questions in there.
Paul, please start.
I don't think that was a rant at all. There is more opportunity due to the density and the geography of the city of the city for a higher density of a network. Also due to the density of origins and destinations and the residential densities. There are equally challenging and ambitious proposals in each of the Aberdeenshire's main towns, although when you look at the plan, they're more discrete in a smaller scale just because of the residential and geographic proximity. And I think actually across the length of the lines across the whole region, I think actually Aberdeenshire has the lion's share of the active plan ambitious kilometres, although some of those are long rural stretches of quiet routes as well. However, I guess where is the biggest potential for achieving walking, wheeling, and cycling for achieving that range of access to education, shopping, and service delivery elements? I would argue that there's a very strong opportunity within certain communities of the city council. So we would perhaps see it as an opportunity, although I'm aware of the wider debate in this area as well. But yeah, I think that's.
I was just wondering if Ewan was wanting to come in and comment.
Yes, Chair. I would, in terms of the ambition within the plans that are set out here, I think there's a couple of key things from an Aberdeenshire perspective. Our members will know they've just agreed a new council plan, and it has at its heart place planning and the importance of those individual communities. And active travel is one of the key parts of that new council plan. And I'm always drawn to one of the key statistics that we have, that Aberdeenshire as an area has, I can't remember what percentage increases, but the number of streets we have, which are essentially urban streets within our communities, is larger than the overall urban network that's contained within the boundaries of Aberdeen City Council. So those are the places where people then can make those short trips, those active trips, where they can walk, where they can cycle within their communities, and that's where we can then make a difference in terms of reducing the need to travel by private car. So I hope that's helpful, Chair. Thank you.
No, thank you. Sandra, please.
So coming on to my next question, which is really around the decision that Aberdeen City Council made recently about the active travel corridor that comes in from West Hill to the city centre. And my question really is, before we've even agreed a regional transport plan, does that decision not put a spoke in the wheels of this plan that's in front of us today? I don't know if there's something that can be answered.
Thanks, Chair. I'll take that one. I think we had quite a lengthy debate about this, Councillor MacDonald, before the paper came here today. I think the reality is that what's laid out there is a sort of an ideal network that we would like to deliver. But your earlier point that you made in your previous question about taking people with us, I think we do have to be cognizant of people's views in the city, and some routes which I'm going to say might be the ideal route right now, people just may not be at that point about being willing to accept it. So I think what we will have to do is just do what we can do in the places where communities are on board and are willing to, and we get a huge demand from communities to see this infrastructure put in. And over time, I have no doubt that people's attitudes will change, and there will be more demand for that. As you rightly point out, we do have a very sort of car-dependent region. I wouldn't even just say city. The northeast
We've talked about public transport, for example, and the challenges that we have around around that in the northeast. So the reality is, we are going to have to work with communities over the coming years to try and put this infrastructure in where we can, and as I say, use very much what you've got in front of you today as a blueprint for where we would like to get to. But even the costs of delivering that will be very significant. So the reality is we will have to do it on an incremental basis.
Thanks very much. I suppose that a lot of what we see in front of us is based on data. It's based on expert opinion from Jacobs and others. We have spent, as Nestrans, a lot of public money on getting consultants to look at these corridors to start pulling things together, and then it does worry me, I guess, and I'm looking for some kind of reassurance going forward. And I hear what David Dunn says, but it does worry me that we can do all that. We can go out to consultation on a particular route, but then we come back with, for me, something that hasn't gone through the ringer and is a route that hasn't really had the same scrutiny and consultation and thought gone into it as the previous ones had done. And so I suppose my plea from the heart is that we don't always throw the baby out with the bathwater, that we do try and stick to a plan that we have, and to take those communities with us, absolutely, but to do it in a way where we have leadership that drives that and not puts up barriers against it, quite frankly. I wasn't on the committee, as you can guess, that made that decision, or I would have probably made these arguments there. But I am on this board, and I think it's important that this board understands and is aware of what is at stake, I guess.
Okay, I'm going to note that for a second. I'm going to bring in Councillor Reid first. I note Councillor Yeo. Just to hear, because he's had his hand up for a while. If I could now, I'll bring you in after that, if that's possible. Councillor Reid, Glenn.
Yeah, Chair. I'm happy if Councillor Yule's wanting to come back on what's just been said. I'm happy to let him go first. I want to discuss the map in great detail, so it might be just moving away from the point. But happy with either.
Then I'll ask Councillor Yeo on the what. Okay, so please, Councillor Yeo.
Thanks, Chair, and I absolutely understand Sandra's frustration. I wasn't terribly happy with the outcome of that meeting either on that item. But I think in general, I will bow to nobody in my commitment to improving active travel networks. But I think if we're going to be successful in introducing those, particularly through communities or in communities, we need to take those communities with us. And doing so will actually make it easier in future to expand active travel networks. But if you start off by hacking off, for want of a better expression, a local community or a large part of it, you're then in a very difficult position in terms of doing a positive selling job. But I understand Sandra's frustration, and I very much look forward to working with her, and I know Miranda would say the same, so that we can expand active travel in the city to improve connectivity for folk on bikes and on foot within the city and from the city out into Aberdeenshire. But I suspect Sandra's not entirely happy with that either, but I'm looking at the positives. Okay,
thank you, Councillor Yeo. What I will do is I will bring in Councillor Reid just now, and my intention also was I was going to ask Tim Steiner to sum up after we'd actually heard various members' questions and everything. So, Councillor Reid first, please. Glenn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As I said before, I really want to concentrate on the map here. A lot of good work has gone into this plan, so I'd like to acknowledge that first of all. But, well, I've been asking for 2 years. for an active travel map. This is an important first step, so I welcome it. I like the interactiveness of it. So, I think it's it'll help people be able to plan if they can actually just zoom into their own areas, etc. But however, I think this is overcomplicated. It's certainly not what I was asking for. And so I'm hoping that we can have a review of this, or it can, things can be added to. I know it's a living document. So as it stands, a layperson will not be able to tell what we actually currently have, what's planned, and what's ambitious. We need a simple map, first and foremost, of what we actually have, what is existing. So people can actually, they can have a look at the infrastructure they've got there, they can know how they can get about, etc., as it currently stands. We need a map of the proposed ones that the Aberdeen City Council are working on, ones that Aberdeenshire Council are working on just now, and attach that at some point. We need estimated dates of this so people can plan ahead as to in 2 years' time, if everything goes to plan, we will have this route. And finally, I think we need a map with our ambitions, for 5-10 years. Okay, we'd like to connect these communities up, etc. And this is, and obviously subject to funding, etc., etc. But this is where we're going. This is our destination. 5, 10, 15 years. This map itself needs a review, as I said, or tidied up. Because in my own ward alone, there are errors. Kintore to Blackburn, there is the commuting route is showing there. It doesn't exist. It's planned. But there's a leisure route from Kintore to Blackburn. It does exist. It's not shown. Now, if you go Kintore to Inverurie, yes, it exists. There's a shared use route there. As I said about Kintore to Blackburn, it doesn't exist. Blackburn to Kirkton of Skene, this shown as a shared use segregated road. I mean, that's just doesn't exist. Is it planned? Is it coming? I've never heard of this route at all. Likewise, Dunecht to Peter Cooter. I cycle these roads all the time. They're not currently planned as far as I know. They don't currently exist. It may be an error in the way it's been presented. The colour is the same as, it's down as a dot line, okay? The same colour as the quiet roads. I think it's meant to be quiet roads, but there's lots of these all over the place, and they're incorrect. So, we need to have a look at this before we actually put this live. And as I said, I think there needs to be three different ones so people can actually, have a look at it and say, plan their journeys. And that's my next question. How will the public access this? So I'll leave it there just now.
Paul, do you want to respond?
Yeah, thanks very much for those comments, Councillor Reid. We've had previous discussions, and clearly you've articulated where you want this to go, and I think we have the basis of that next step from what we have, where we have got at the moment. It is we have as well information available in terms of what we already have. That needs to be overlaid on that. But the plan, the purpose of this plan is to set out the long-term ambition of proposals and where we see the network developing over the long term, and those grades of development rolling out as we go forward over time and as the funding becomes available. So probably what we have before you is very much that ambitious, probably even beyond 5 to 10 years in terms of the network, as we see that long-term blueprint of what we see developing it, and then the requirement, then the ask back to the local transport strategies is how would we phase this and how do we deliver this going forward. We would be making this public at this stage on the Nestrans website in terms of that wider long-term network planning piece.
I'm just having a look at the actual map here, Paul, and I think the comment I've got, and it picks up a little bit what Glenn said, is my looking at it just briefly on the screen here, nowhere does it actually say like a timeline. So I can get where Glenn's looking at it and he's saying, okay, this doesn't exist yet. Either we're showing it or the information's not really fitting with what is current at the moment. Is there a way of, if we're going to make this public, where we can actually put that sort of disclaimer, etc., in there as the timeline?
I think we can make the key more clear as to what is proposed, what is actually on the ground. The timeline over the last little while has become more challenging because of where we had thought funding might be available for the delivery of this has become a lot more uncertain in the last couple of months. And so when we're talking about a timeline, that it makes things a little bit more, we would have to make some, depending on what assumptions we want to make about the amount of funding that's coming through, progression on this will be directly related to the amount of funding that we're able to achieve going forward. We had been anticipating an increasing numbers of funding coming through for exactly this sort of project over the medium to long term, but that assumption has now been disrupted in terms of that. But we may well be able to. We are doing some prioritisation work in the technical report. We've set out what we believe the priorities should be. Certainly in Aberdeenshire, focusing on the side line and the Full Martin line, and certainly in the Aberdeen city area, focusing first on the city centre area and then working out to the key communities beyond that at that point. So that's, and Aberdeen City Council have requested to do some more prioritisation and phasing work in that area as well.
Okay, and Glenn, I should have asked, do you wish to come back?
Yeah, I certainly do, Chair. Thanks very much for that. But just straight away, just in relation to what Paul's just said just now, surely timeline shouldn't be an issue at all. If this is a living document, we start off, we know what dates we've got planned, and if funding changes and it isn't available, whatever, we just update it. So that should take care of that. So I did ask for, okay, I understand now what you're saying, that this is our overall grand, ambitious map. That's fine. But that doesn't really help people right now, in the sense that if you're, I don't know, in this year, next year, the year after that, you're thinking about moving and you're wanting to move to like somewhere that's got active travel, infrastructure that's coming along, etc. You can't really tell what's coming, what's already been approved and is going to be committed to, that is committed to, and with a, we'll have a date with it. We need a map that actually shows what is there, what Aberdeen City Council and what Aberdeenshire Council have already approved and are committed to, along with those date lines. And on top of that, so that's that's an ask of the board, and I have been asking for 2 years. So, and I had agreement that we would actually get something like that. So I want to put that back to the board. And also, I just want to point out there are factual errors here. So this should not go public without a review. I'm happy to sit down. I can point these out to you. There's factual errors in my ward, in my area. So I'm assuming there will be across other areas as well. So before we agree to publish this, we need to sit down and have a look at this in more detail. If I'm seeing it, other people who cycle regularly, etc., or use active travel for walking or jogging, they will know it as well.
I think the first point is a work in progress, but relatively easy work to do. Now we have the mapping. Now we have the routes identified. I'm happy to take on board comments that people will have on that aspect of where you believe that there are errors, and we can certainly look at that and understand that. Although obviously the mapping that has been produced has been developed by working groups for both Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire officers, but where you believe that there are errors, more than happy to have those looked at prior to publication.
Can I come back?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And on top of that, what about the existing map with what has been, what is already in the pipeline? This is what people currently want. That's what I've been asking for 2 years.
Again, that is an iteration of what we have before us. We have the grand plan, which is mapped out. We have on top of that, we can plan on what we have existing, and then we can use where we know that there is a committed proposal and work in progress that can also be mapped as well. But there is uncertainty, more uncertainty at the moment than there has been previously about the timelines that we have for some of those proposals because of the funding uncertainty we find ourselves with at this particular time.
Okay, Paul, again, Chair, if I can come back. Thank you for that. But what I'm really looking for is a commitment that this map will be presented perhaps in two different ways. One, as it is the grand ambitious one, etc. That's fine, what we have before us. But one where, it just shows the existing routes and the ones that are committed to. Because that's what people need right now to actually plan journeys.
Yes, I think we will be able to develop that, although I'll have to make sure that we have the resource and the funding to continue that development, bearing in mind that Aberdeen City Council have requested to continue developing this as well. So there's a little bit of working in parallel or making sure that we get the sequencing of that correct, because transport strategy and some of the phasing and prioritisation around that. So there can definitely be work on that one, but we need to manage different work streams that are going forward in that place.
Okay, I'm going to bring Sandra back in at this point. Okay.
It was really just I absolutely get what is being said, but I don't think that we should get ourselves into a position as a board where we are going to develop an app for active travel. Well, maybe we will, but we will need a proper business case and a platform on which to do it and so on. And I think we've got to be very clear about what it is that we're asking to do. There are, well, I just use Google Maps, quite frankly, for trying to get around on a bike or by foot or on cars in my car. But so I think we just need to understand, and I get what's been asked for. I do still have an out-of-date paper map with the cycle routes that we can have around. And every time you go to, well, there won't be tourist information centres for very much longer, but when you go to a local area, you do go in and try and get a cycle map and so on. So I think as a board, we need to be very careful that we're not getting into that territory where we want to develop an app for active travel use rather than this, which is a tool, a development tool for the future for our pipeline of projects that we have as a regional transport authority. I don't know if that's helpful. It's probably not what you want to hear, but it's where I'm feeling I am at the moment.
No, it's fine. I saw comments, etc. I noticed Glenn's want to come back in, but I was going to say something first of all before that. I think my concern is here, one, we've got this particular report, we've got this particular tool, and I think, I would want to put out something that's public, that it's basically not got errors in it in terms of routes, etc. So that part of it, etc., what Glenn is actually given good examples, and I think actually is totally fair. We certainly wouldn't want to put that out, so I certainly really appreciate the error checking and doing that offline, etc. And obviously it's time it takes, accept that. I kind of see it a little bit, very much like what you've said there, Sandra. I see it in terms of our existing, in some respects different, how we would do it and how we would show it. So if it's anything, it's seeing it different recommendations, but not even linked to this paper in some respects. It's how I capture a general recommendation and we bring that back, that we can actually show it. And I know you've actually asked for it before, Sandra, etc. as well, and I know I've done as well, asked. What have we actually got in terms of documenting what is our active travel routes, etc. right now? Again, so I do see it in some respects separate to what is the theme of this particular paper. At that point, I'm going to bring Glenn back in and obviously thank him here for waiting. So, Glenn, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Sandra. I'll try and be brief. No one's looking for an app or anything. We already have the information about all the existing routes. We already have the information of what's been agreed. You can just put another tab on it, whereby people can access that and they can see it. It's the way we present it. It would make it easier for members as well to have a look at it and say like, all right, that's existing. Click in a tab. What's the ambitious stuff? And you can see it almost overlaying or whatever. But it's the way we present the information. We already have the information.
Paul, do you want to come back at all?
Yeah, that element is reasonably simple to do. Again, that next phase of what the plan is going forward, we just need to have a little bit of carefulness about that one, or a slight bit of caution around that one, knowing that the City Council has explicitly asked for some more work on that prioritisation piece. But there are obviously plans in place for schemes that are being developed at the moment, although, as I said, the timescales for completion of those works have become slightly more uncertain in the last couple of months with respect to the plan that we previously had been basing that on. But then again, there are schemes that have committed funding in place, such as the routes alongside the external links to Aberdeen, South Harbour, etc., which are definitely going through the design process within the City Council at the moment, and they definitely can be shown and annotated on the map in that respect.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to ask Mr. Steiner, Tim, if you'd like to come in and talk and maybe sum up a little bit the discussion we've had.
Sure, thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Please someone shout if you can't. Yes, Tim Steiner here from Jacobs. It's been my pleasure to manage this work over the last year or so and work closely with the Nestrans team and officers from both local authorities to bring this forward. I think, yes, there may well be errors in a map of and a network of this complexity. I'll reflect on that. Happy to have any other suggestions from yourselves, from officers and the like. We have reviewed every element of this network with officers in detail. It's also been subject to the public consultation, which we got a good level of response for. But yes, errors will inevitably be there at some stages. Also, there are very many matters of judgment within this as well. Which community should be linked directly, which routes might be most appropriate, what standards should those links be. They are all matters of judgment, and so happy to reflect on any of those points. But I think big picture, and I'm trying to just think to sum up without just repeating what's in the papers and what Paul said in his introduction, of overall, I think this network presents what clearly is a very ambitious scale of change, but it is the scale of change that reflects the policy that Nestrans and your partners have been moving towards. So I think if you want to achieve those policy outcomes, these are the kinds of levels of investment that you're looking at. It is, as Paul highlighted, a long-term plan. Perhaps some of our European neighbours that have are well ahead of us in terms of active travel infrastructure, have been working on these things for decades, and they're not finished yet. And we need to recognise that. But I think to emphasise, there's been a few comments this afternoon about bringing members of the public with us, and obviously some of the challenges that we realise around local implementation, and some parts of this will cause some people problems. But Paul made reference to the public consultation, research panel, schools engagement, a whole variety of other things that happened in the development of this plan. There is broad support for this network. The scale of ambition is reasonable within the feedback that we have had through those channels. Some people want less, yes, but equally some people want more. So I feel this is a reasonable balance along those lines. And I think in terms of bringing people with us then to help with the implementation of specific local schemes, I hope this is helpful to Nestrans and your partners to set out the scale of ambition, and that all of those individual links, some of which will be challenging, add up to a large cohesive regional whole, and that will provide real benefits in the long term for people across the region. So, Chair, that's my brief sum up. happy to take any queries if it's appropriate.
Okay, I don't see any further hands have gone up, etc. So I'm content with that. I'm going to take us back to what are the recommendations in 5.2, and it's on page 223, where we've 4 recommendations set out. I think the only one that I'm really concerned more, if anything, is the second one. It says approve the technical documentation and network plan for publication on the Nestrans website, and I would say only in that is subject to we do review and pick up the errors of well, I could use the word error that the board have highlighted here today before it goes out. I'm aware we've got to support the maintenance as it's a live document, but I feel we should, if an error has been identified, we should actually correct that before it goes out. What's the thoughts on members to that? Happy enough? Agreed? Okay. With that, I'll thank both Paul and Tim for leading the discussion and the presentation, and we will move on to item 6.1, people in place update, and that's John Barron that's going to be taking us through that. John, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall the reports that were presented to the board earlier this year. Following on from these updates and the preparatory groundwork and various requirements that Nestrans made of partners in the terms and conditions of the grant offer letters in the first week of July, each of the partner organisations completed the report of the progress that had been made during the first quarter of the financial year. These reports were collated into a complete Nestrans Quarter 1 report. This is something that's never existed before. It is attached as Appendix 1. There's never been a complete and connected report showing all the progress of supported behaviour change projects in one place. It's all previously been variously reported and as such massively disjointed. At this point, it's worth bearing in mind that because of the hugely accelerated pace that this programme came into being, many of the projects could not formally get underway as the grant offer letters were not finalised until legal colleagues were satisfied with my draft until well into Quarter 1. Also, some projects were not scheduled to start until later in the year, so still show project not yet commenced in the Q1 report. That is not to say that nothing at all has happened. All the necessary administrative steps have been completed, including the preparation of a project initiation document and other things, meaning that those projects are almost effectively primed and ready. Appendix 2 shows where the project programme is in terms of spend across the various projects. That aside, it's my view that the Quarter 1 report provides clear evidence of many examples of outstanding interventions across North East communities. Our partners and their hugely enthusiastic delivery staff are to be applauded for that. Transport Scotland, like Nestrans, the other RTPs and partner organisations are also continuing to learn collaboratively daily from the ongoing process. There are now a range of recurring meetings that are hosted by Transport Scotland that myself and others in the team attend. TS also provide clear access to a name-specific contact for Nestrans staff should the issue arise for advice or guidance. For example, yesterday Lucy attended the first iteration of a comms group. Sadly, up to now, there's been no launch of people in place for Transport Scotland. This had been promised to us at the start of the year, and it's a hugely missed opportunity. However, since we are where we are in that regard, we've discussed internally how Nestrans, together with partners, through no fault of our making, can improve our comms, marketing and signposting of what projects are being delivered and how someone can register an interest. Next Tuesday, we're hosting an online Teams meeting with all the relevant reps from the various partner organisations and all the Nestrans team. Why we're looking to host this is detailed in the paper. It remains the intention also to host an in-person event, probably in March next year, in the North East, where the reps from partner organisations, including their senior management, together with board members, other elected members, local authority officers and other local group representatives can be present. This event is planned to be a much more public-facing showcase of what has been and is being delivered. I've added some information on the Community Project Transition Fund. This fund follows on from the Smarter Choices, Smarter Places stream, and this fund will only exist this year. It's not yet clear how these will be funded next year. The most likely avenue, I suspect, is that it will be subsumed into next year's People in Place programme, but I don't think anyone's got that answer currently. In summary, the allocation of funds in such a short space of time for the Community Projects Fund has not resulted in an appropriate slice of the £2.1 million cake coming to the North East in exchange for ice cream. We're speaking about cake now. I'm linking in regularly with Pass for All, who are overseeing the administration of this, and the most recent discussions we've had in group meetings with other RTPs is there's a clear consensus among us all for the future model, however it's shaped, to be centred on a regional focus in line with the Verity House Agreement and the creation of the People in Place programme, which is a 360-degree turn from how it was all delivered before the 1st of April. In summary, that's something I do very well. Our People in Place programme is in a really good place. I'd like to place on formal record my thanks and that of Nestrans for all the individual and collective efforts from partners to help build this significant programme from a standing start in such a short space of time. Finally, the recommendations are to note the ongoing work, next week's virtual event, the plan for an in-person event in the North East early next year, and the overview of the Community Fund projects. I could typically go on and on about this, but I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members might have.
I can believe you. Thank you, John. Do members have any questions or comments on this report? I'm not seeing any, so with that, I'll take it we're approving what the recommendations which are to note each of the things. Okay, so we move on to the next item in our agenda, which is item 6.2, the Rail Action Plan update, and it's Paul Finch is presenting.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report provides an update across a range of aspects relating to the development of rail services and infrastructure across the region. Obviously, we've previously discussed some of the meetings under the item on Director's report. Aberdeen to Lawrence Kirk multimodal study includes options around rail stations at Newton Hill and Cove, alongside other measures which are not rail related, including active travel networks, strategic bus priority measures, inclusive of ART, mobility hub Paul Ethan. I reported this to the last board, the progression that we were making. There's the detailed options appraisal, which is going on at this moment. We've previously, in September, had engagement with community councils in both Paul Ethan and Newton Hill. We're having live consultation. The consultation has gone live on Tuesday, with a consultation open for a 5-week period, with 2 drop-ins scheduled in Cove and Cove at the Orton's Hotel and Newton Hill in the Betteridge Centre in 9th and 10th of October. Currently anticipated that the detailed options appraisal report will be reported to the board either in November 24 or one of the first meetings in 2025 on that aspect on the local rail stations. The next item there is the Buchan Sustainable Transport Study. This was being progressed by the Campaign for North East Rail and the Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce. I think through previous board updates, we've provided members with updates on the general progress of that. Since the last board, an executive summary has been published by the Chamber and CNER, providing an overview of the case for change and preliminary options appraisal. The case for change was very much aligned with parallel work we were doing on the road corridor on the A90, A952, but looking at interventions on a shorter timescale, with the BST looking at longer term options. The work has identified a range of different rail alignments between Dice, Ellen, Peterhead and Fraserburgh, and at present neither CNER or the Chamber have funding secured to progress to a detailed options appraisal, although that is their desire that they want to do that. We continue just to liaise with both parties to understand future progress on this, as well as keeping stakeholders abreast of activities. Progress on the separate Nestrans A90, A952 study continues, following approval in board to progress to detailed options appraisal. And again, that's progressing well, looking at the different options, different junction alignments, including at Tulloch Burness, for example. On early September, the Transport Secretary announced the procurement process for replacing high-speed train fleet could begin. The high-speed trains are key rolling stock for the intercity network, predominantly used between Edinburgh and Glasgow, as well as a number of Aberdeen to Inverness connections. Few details are available at the moment. I would highlight, though, that procurement of the fleet is required to be completed somewhat prior to the end of the lease date of 2030, so to allow for driver training and familiarisation, etc. There will also be considerations within the procurement as to how this would incorporate the future ambition for decarbonisation of the network. But again, that question isn't answered within the details we have available for us at the moment. We've already touched on the Aberdeen to Central Enhancements project. In April, we updated the board on the progress that Transport Scotland were making, and that they'd highlighted there would be a delay to the anticipated completion of the project and no new timescale confirmed for that. We can, and I think again I've updated you previously on the outcome of the Central Belt quarterly stakeholder meeting as well. And finally, oh no, not quite finally, Aberdeen to Inverness, Hightrans are looking to do some work on that route, reminding everybody of the shared ambition for a sort of a 2-hourly journey time, an hourly clock face departure. They're looking to review that and make sure that the future requirements for that are built into future planning and procurement pieces. And again, if Hightrans take forward that piece of work, we may well be involved in that probably in the next financial year. And then the last one there is about Access for All funding. The Department for Transport announced in May the 50 stations awarded Access for All funding for initial feasibility work. Inverurie was selected, which will be a disappointment to the Nestrans Board because our clearly stated priority was the issue at Inch, where one of the platforms has absolutely no step-free access at all. The Inch proposal was not successful in this process. In July, I accompanied a delegation from Network Rail, who will be commissioning that initial feasibility work at Inverurie rail stations. But we also did visit Inch, and we were able to explain the full range of the issues at both those locations. Again, Network Rail are keen to ensure that that wider accessibility outside the red line boundary of the station does include all modes of transport, and we'll have to see how that one progresses going forward. And again, that may interface meaningfully with city centre master planning work that's being progressed by Aberdeenshire Council. So there's a range of recommendations, mainly for noting the progress against different projects going forward, support joint working with Hightrans when that comes about, in E as well, going forward. So thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I see Isabel's got her hand up, so I'll let Isabel in first.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's really disappointing about Inch. And so what happens next? Because it really needs done. So is there another solution, another way of getting it done, or does it just have to wait another 10 years or whatever before it's considered?
Paul, that's a great question.
It's a great question. Again, I think what we need to do is to keep on lobbying, keep on raising the profile of it. Although the rail industry loves its rules and guidelines and its assessment criteria, because it is a wide UK-wide network, they are quite active and on that. We just need to keep on putting it into that highlight, see if there's other funding that becomes available, although none is immediately apparent to us, and keep on making the case. I think that's the only thing that we can do at this precise moment with what we have in front of us.
I'm just my question was actually going to be on Inch as well. So apologies, Miranda, I'll ask it at this point here. Do we have any feedback as to why Inch wasn't successful versus Inverurie?
I haven't seen, and I haven't requested the detailed assessment of that, and I think that would be the next. That would be a good question to ask if we can get that available. Looking at it, I think it very much comes down to footfall would probably be one of the key elements there, which would disadvantage Inch as compared to as opposed to Inverurie. And I think that would probably be one of the key weighting area in terms of the number of, even though it is an acute situation and it totally constrains activities, not mothers with children, elderly people, perhaps they can walk but have difficulty with the stairs, etc., etc. But I think probably it will just come down to the numbers will be the key driver in trying to come up with reasons why. Yeah, so I think that's probably it.
Okay, Paul, appreciate that. Miranda, many thanks for waiting, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the Aberdeen Florence multimodal corridor study, and obviously noting my slight interest, given that I am the local councillor for Cove, and the progression of this project. I think we're hoping for a bit more of an update at this stage, and I understand where we are within the options appraisal. I guess my question's around the 2 engagement sessions that are happening. You did say engagements happened with community councils, but you only noted Newton Hill and Port Lethen. Is there a reason the city community councils weren't involved in that? Obviously there is Cove, Nig and Concorth that this primarily would affect, and why were they not included within that engagement? And then what communication has happened around the engagement session that's happening in Cove? As I know, a lot of residents in my area are very interested in this project and would like to share their views.
We have tried unsuccessfully over a number of weeks to contact Cove Community Council and to obtain a slot with them, and both through published details but also through the offices of Aberdeen City Council, we just were not able to obtain a response to the approaches that we made at that point. We have since prepared a letter which I believe has gone to all councillors, elected members and all identified stakeholders, and I believe community council chairs as well, highlighting that as well. But we've also publicised that on our social media feeds and our website as well. But if there are other opportunities to make that engagement with the community councils, we're more than happy to do so. It's not a closed door, it's just we weren't able to get success with that approach.
Thank you. Given Karen, who is in the chamber, is our community council liaison officer, it might be worth hooking you two up. There's also a community council meeting next week on Monday, just flagging that one for yourself.
The things I learned sitting as chair. Karen, I take it that's okay with you? Okay. And you're content with that as well, Miranda. Okay. All right. With that, I'll take us back to let's pull up the recommendation. Just double check, if I may. Is the note? Yeah. No. Okay, we're all content to accept the recommendations as set out on page 2.
Chair, I would add in under F your request for a report, maybe just circulated rather than come to a report to this committee, just to understand what the main reasons why Inch wasn't successful, because like others in the room, I've heard about Inch for year upon year upon year being on.
Okay, that's fine. No, I'm content. Okay, so with that, the rest of the recommendations we're happy with as well. Okay. Item 6.3, Nestrans Grant Scheme Review, and it's Adam Kench. It's presenting this, please. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on the 2 grant schemes offered by Nestrans, the Sustainable Travel Grant and Community Sustainable Travel Grant. In April 2024, officers decided to close both schemes for applications. This decision was partly driven by the change in funding nationally for active travel with the introduction of the People in Place programme and the Community Project Transition Fund. Whilst the grant schemes have been closed, potential applicants have been able to put forward an expression of interest. Since closing the 2 grant schemes, officers have reviewed the guidance and application process. The revised guidance for both schemes has been altered and constitutes Appendix 1 and 2 to this report. The biggest change to the guidance of both schemes is a proposal for the opening of the schemes to be across 2 separate designated application periods, rather than being open for applications at any time. It is proposed that Sustainable Travel Grant will be relaunched soon after this meeting, following the approval from the board. Applications are open to any business or organisation in the region, and they would have until Thursday the 31st of October 2024 to submit applications. The Sustainable Travel Grant can offer up to 50% funding for a project, and is expected that applicants should be able to reclaim the cost this financial year. Following this, it is proposed that the Community Sustainable Travel Grant would be relaunched with approval from the board. Applicants would have until Friday 29th of November 2024 to submit applications. This scheme is designed for community groups, smaller charities and social enterprises within the region, and can offer up to 100% funding with up to a maximum of 5,000 available. There's 2 recommendations, which are to note the content of this report and to approve the relaunch of both the Sustainable Travel Grant and Community Sustainable Travel Grant based on the proposed timeline. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I just look for members if there's any questions on that. And okay, I see none. Mike, oh sorry, Miranda, please.
Sorry, thank you.
That's okay.
Very happy that the grant scheme is relaunching, and I guess how are we pushing the message out to communities, etc., about ability to apply?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to work closely with Lucy to promote the scheme a lot more than we probably usually would, because of the fact that we're working on an application period, and that requires a bit more of a strategy in terms of the marketing rather than the one-off posts that we usually do. So yeah, very much on our radar.
Okay, I see no further hands at this point, so I take it we're content to accept the recommendations as set out on page 283. Yes? Okay. All right, item 6.4, ART update, and it's Kirsty Chalmers. Kirsty, please.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report really is to request board approval to extend the current value of the Aberdeen Rapid Transit Strategic Business Case Consultancy Commission that we've got running, which has been commissioned by Nestrans and is being funded through the Aberdeen City Region Deal Strategic Transport Appraisal. There are 2 work streams that we are wanting to progress through this budget extension to support the strategic business case development. The first really is to progress the bus priority and active travel options along the ART routes that have been developed through the multimodal corridor studies. We're wanting to undertake some supplementary work to support the development of the strategic business case, focusing on reviewing the options that have come through the multimodal corridor studies, identifying any constraints and decision pathway going forward for those, an audit of public acceptability, which would feed into identification of short, medium and long-term options for bus priority, again from the outputs of those corridor studies. That will help to inform both the development of the business case, but also ongoing discussions on the development of a basic bus service improvement partnership. This work's also looking to establish some high-level common design standards for bus priority and ART halts, as well as an assessment of potential options of halt locations. It'll also set out the framework for further modelling and establishing an approach to future engagement. The second strand of work that we're looking to progress is further development of the Bus Service Improvement Partnership Plan. This is one of the delivery models available to support Aberdeen Rapid Transit. Work's been ongoing on the development of the BSIP plan led by Aberdeenshire Council, but we're now at a point where I think a bit of expert technical advice on completing some of the statutory elements of the BSIP and developing that first scheme would be really beneficial, and this links really strongly into the development of the ART strategic business case. So we're looking to a budget extension totalling £80,000. I should say this budget extension falls within the allocated funding that is there for Aberdeen Rapid Transit that's being funded through the City Region Deal, and therefore there's no implications for the Nestrans budget for this request. But in line with our financial regulations, we're required to report this and get approval to progress. So the recommendation is approve an extension to the value of the current ART Strategic Business Case Commission of £80,000 to allow this additional work to continue. I'm happy to take any questions.
Sandra, please.
Nothing on the substantive request for funding, Kirsty, but I was intrigued by the phrase audit of public acceptability, and I wondered if there was a particular tool or how that came about, and has it been used? It's not something I've particularly heard of before, so interested to hear a little bit more.
It's not a tool as such. I think recognising the public views that has been demonstrated through other work, we know that the bus priority measures and the active travel measures that will be coming through as part of ART will generate a lot of feedback. I think there's some where those constraints are greater than others. So really what we're wanting to do is take a view of, because these have progressed through individual corridor studies to this date, and we're now trying to progress that as an ART network, is to take a review of that network as was agreed, and really try to identify as part of sort of risk identification, what is going to be, what parts of the network and what the options that are coming forward are really going to be the contentious ones, and that will help us to inform as well what might be a potential phasing as we go forward, sort of short, medium, longer term actions. What's going to require more detailed analysis? Where are there more than one option that we're going to have to? So it's really just a sort of a heads up on risk going forward. In part, it's not a tool as such. It forms public acceptability forms part of the stag appraisal process anyway. So it's probably a bit more of an in-depth look from that perspective. If that helps.
That's very helpful.
Forgot to put the microphone on there. Okay, I see no more hands with questions or comments, so I'll bring us back to we're all content with to accept the recommendation as set out on page 296. Agreed. Okay. Item 7 on our agenda is the progress reports. I guess if there's any questions from members on that. Oh, Sandra, please.
More of a comment than a question. I think on affordability and accessibility of bus travel, I just wanted to say that I was disappointed with First Bus's increase in fares, and it does seem counter to what we were perhaps hearing more widely about more people using the bus, particularly in Aberdeen. I can't speak for the wider Shire, but it was very much, a red flag in the report that we have in front of us. I don't know if there's something maybe to ask about.
Okay, Miranda, please.
It's related to that point, but not strictly on that point. I guess there has been an increase in fares across both First and Stagecoach over the last few months, and I guess where are we as a city on some form of integrated ticketing? Is there any plans to bring that forward? Is that something that is in discussion with the rail, bus, etc. operators? Consistency of ticketing is sort of key as we move forward to ART as well. I guess where are we in that discussion?
I'm just looking around who's best to actually answer that. Kirsty, perhaps?
I can certainly respond. Certainly, from sort of sitting with it on the bus, the North East Bus Alliance, fares and ticketing is a part of that of the bus action plan. I think recognising, however, what control we have over fares, but I think the focus of the bus action plan so far has been to ensure that people are at least being signposted to the best ticket that is available for them. So obviously First haven't launched their tap and cap. You should be able to access at least the best fare for your journey. I appreciate that doesn't help in terms of single journeys, going forwards, and it is disappointing obviously that they're going up, and the bus operators obviously have their own challenges to deal with. But from an ART perspective, integrated ticketing has to be a key part of that, and I think we'll have to, depending on how the delivery mechanism that we pursue for that, whether that's in partnership with the bus operators or other mechanisms, that will be a key part of those discussions going forwards.
Thank you, that's helpful. I guess speaking to some of my colleagues in other major cities, this has been achieved already or is in the process of being implemented. So I guess what discussions are we having with other areas, other transport Nestrans equivalent
Ewan.
about this.
Chair, if I may help in terms of some of that wider work, so absolutely through the Association of Transport Coordinating Officers, ATCO, that type of work is ongoing to look at sharing that knowledge and expertise across all the local authority areas and into the 7 regional transport partnerships. Within the North East, we do have a long-standing grasshopper ticket that is, in essence, has the correct platform behind it, so it allows that integrated ticketing option. We've never quite fully landed that in terms of, and there's a reasonable uptake, and in many ways the discussions of the Bus Alliance did mean that we found ourselves in a position where actually the tap and cap and the other offers from the commercial operators were, I suppose, they had the support and the ability to land those. But the back office function exists in terms of to be able to put something in place. The ideal would be, yes, to take that forward on a more common platform across all of the RTP areas and within all the different parts of Scotland. But my understanding is we're not quite there yet with some of that work. So.
Okay, for now, Miranda. Okay. Councillor Ian, please. Have you?
Thanks. It's a belated just noticed that Cycling Scotland and Cycling UK are mentioned at various points in the progress report. So, having considered the objective test, I don't believe it's necessary to withdraw. I am a member, though.
Thank you very much for that. Okay. Okay. With that, we'll move on to publications and consultations, and it's Adam Kench that's going to be presenting.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform members on recent publications since the last meeting. An aviation statement has been published by Transport Scotland, which identifies 3 key themes for the future of Scottish air travel. Within that statement, outcomes and actions are provided ranging from short-term to long-term. A smart, digital, integrated ticketing and payments delivery strategy has also been published and builds on the previous 2018 strategy. Short-term to long-term policy actions have been identified across 3 sub-themes alongside 2 cross-cutting actions. Members will be aware that the Scottish Peak Fares removal pilot will be concluding soon, and a final evaluation report has been published, which talks through the benefits of the pilot and the challenges faced in achieving some of the identified objectives. Finally, Transform Scotland have published a review of the Scottish Government's performance on its sustainable travel commitments. Each policy commitment has been ranked as either making good progress, slow progress, or off track. The board report outlines how each of the 10 commitments has been ranked. So the board is just asked to note the publication of the documents outlined in this report. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just look briefly online. I don't see anybody online with questions, and I don't see anybody in the room, so I take it we're quite content to note and the recommendation, etc. And we will move on to item 9, which is information bulletins, and that is Rab that's going to take us through that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just a number of matters for noting and for information. Get About is ongoing and has done some campaigns over the summer months, including promoting the Transport to Healthcare Information Centre. A couple of events coming up which are highlighted there for members' awareness. Also wanted to talk about the National Cycle Monitoring Framework, and some initial reports there are included of modal share, so 5 roads that are counted in Aberdeen and 5 in Aberdeenshire on 2 days twice a year. And you can see the dominance of the car, which I guess won't surprise anybody in the chamber today. It is really significant, though, that we're now starting to get that detail of information and over a number of years, and we'll be able to monitor that as it goes forward. The third one to pick up with you is the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, which as a public body we now need to take cognizance of in preparing documents and policy statements. The board is recommended to note the contents of the report, including the appendix with some news coverage in recent weeks. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any hands up to comment on that at all, so I'll note the report and we'll move on to the next item, which is item 10, conferences and presentations, and it's Rav again, please.
Again, thanks, Chair. Items for noting and for awareness, a number of conferences recently or coming up. Quite a range of things starting to come forward again, but most we now find are free of charge, but we still bring them to members' information here at board meetings, and a couple of presentations there that Nestrans staff will be undertaking in the next couple of months.
Okay, and again, I see no hands up, so we'll note that. And we'll move on to item 11, which is pending business and reports for future meetings, and it's Rab again.
Thank you, Chair. A standing item that we report to every meeting. We'll see that a number of reports have been brought forward today, which had been previously noted as pending business, and a couple that have been discussed today that will be coming forward to future meetings. So, climate change duties normally comes to the November meeting, and we're expecting both councils to be developing their local transport strategies over the next few months, I'll put it that way. There's also a couple of items I think have been picked up today that you would like future reports on, and we'll take these away and add them to the pending list, if not to the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, again, I'm just looking around, there's no hands, so we'll note that. And that takes us on to what would be the end of the public business today. And I'll take us into the private session for what is the board membership. I'm going to, at that point, I think I'll hand back to Karen, please.